Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. David Glassner, Superintendent of Shaker Heights City School District. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. I apologize that I'm running a little bit later than usual. As many of you may know, Governor DeWine released guidelines for reopening, restart of school in the fall this afternoon, and I wanted to make sure to include some information about those guidelines in today's update. So hence the slight delay. Before I get started, there are just a few housekeeping items that I want to mention and remind everybody of. First of all, I provide these summer updates on a regular basis every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 p.m. to continue to update our community on our plans for the 2020-2021 school year. I'm excited to announce that as of this past Tuesday, we are now providing a transcription of this update, as well as translations of this update into a number of different languages. You can see this update live right now. You can also see a recording of this update on our website, www.shaker.org. The transcription and translation of the update is also available on the shaker.org website. And those are usually posted within, at most, 24 hours of the live update. Thank you to our communications team for helping make this possible. The other thing I want to mention is for today, I'm going to be going over quite a bit of information, some more content, some more information that's specific to our plans for the 2020-2021 school year. I hope to answer many of the questions that were submitted during the course of my presentation. Because we're both running a little late today and because I'm going to be providing some more information today, I'm not going to have time, though, to answer questions individually at the end of the presentation today. That said, people are always encouraged to submit questions in advance via our website for us to consider answering or for us to respond to during these updates. You are also welcome to put questions in the Zoom panel or in the Facebook Live chat. Although I can't answer those questions in real time, we do monitor those and include those questions for me to respond to at a later time. With that, I'm going to share my screen again like I did last time, because I have some slides that I think will help guide this update today. And I'm going to, as soon as I can get my screen shared, I will. Give me 1 second here. While I'm waiting to share my screen, I will start by just going through the different topics that I will be addressing today. First of all, I will be talking about, and here we go, I can now share my screen. So you should see the slide deck now. The topics that I'll be talking about today include some information about the state guidance that was just released, a review of the instructional models that we're looking at to start school with in the fall, some information about the principles we have used to guide our work, and then I'm going to focus on secondary school course offerings. I know we've gotten a lot of questions about what courses we'll be offering next school year, particularly in our secondary schools, which includes grades 5 through 12. So let me start just by talking a little bit about the state guidance. First of all, the state guidance really, as we expected, defers a lot of the decisions or provides a lot of the decision-making authority to local schools and local school districts. As we are prioritizing the same things as the state, which is to make sure that we are educating our students while keeping our students and staff safe. The state did say, Governor DeWine did say in his announcement today that there's a strong consensus across the state that students need to get back into our school buildings and to have in-person schooling whenever possible. That has certainly been one of the principles that has guided our work here in Shaker Heights. So here are just 3 of the guiding principles or basic principles that Governor DeWine announced earlier today. There have been a lot of questions that are specific to the health and safety protocols that schools will be expected to follow when we return in person in the fall. And so Governor DeWine today outlined 5 recommendations that we are expected to follow when we have students coming to school for in-person learning. First of all, we are expected to vigilantly assess for symptoms. The way the governor described this today is that there should be health checks that take place prior to students and staff coming into the building. This means that parents and caregivers should conduct daily health assessments at home. And as a district, we are expected to have a testing strategy in place in collaboration with local and state health officials. As I've mentioned in previous updates, we work and are working closely with the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, and I expect that we will continue to do so, particularly as we think about the need for testing when students and staff return. Secondly, it is important that we have structures to ensure that students and staff can regularly wash and sanitize hands. We know that that's really important in preventing the spread of COVID-19. Already, I can say that we are looking at our school buildings and making sure that there will be easy access to hand washing stations and or hand sanitizer. And we've already begun the ordering process to make sure that we have adequate supplies to enable students and staff to sanitize their hands on a regular basis. Number 3, we need to make sure that we are thoroughly cleaning and sanitizing the school environment. When the governor talked about that today, he talked about making sure that when there is a switch in groups of students using a classroom, that there's an opportunity to clean that space or those spaces prior to different groups using a class space. Number 4, it's important that we practice physical distancing, and the governor really encouraged schools to strive to maintain 6-foot distance as much as possible, including in classrooms and buses, playgrounds, other common spaces, and modifying schedules to achieve the ability to make sure that students and staff maintain physical distancing throughout the school day. And lastly, the governor talked about making sure that all schools and school districts have a face covering policy. We have gotten a lot of questions about masks and whether we will be requiring masks for all students and staff. That's something that we are still working on. We're still working on clarifying and identifying our specific face covering policy for the Shaker Heights City School District. What the governor said today, though, I think will help inform that policy. First of all, he said that he would expect that all school staff are required to wear face coverings, masks throughout the school day, unless there is some underlying health concern that prevents a staff member from wearing a face covering. The governor also said that students in grades 3 and up are strongly recommended to wear masks during the school day. That students below grade 3 can wear a mask. It's a little bit more at the school's discretion. I think the governor said something like we need to use some common sense when we're talking about the students wearing masks at lower grade levels. So these are just some of the health guidelines that we saw that the state or the governor released today. The state is also releasing a more in-depth document, a guidance document for schools to look at that will be followed by specific guidance from the Ohio Department of Education. The governor's guidance, that document was released literally just before I started this update today, so we haven't had a chance to fully review it. And we expect that there will be more guidance coming from the Ohio Department of Education over the next few days and weeks. That said, I do think we're happy to have this guidance released, and it does give us additional information as we prepare for the opening of school or the start of school in the fall. So now I just want to kind of review a little bit about the instructional models that we are exploring for the 2020-2021 school year. One thing that I really want to make clear, because we've gotten this question a number of different times, is that we are planning for these models to be in effect for the entire school year, for the entire 2021 school year. And the reason we're doing that is because the models, in order to really implement a model, we have to provide education over the course of the year. And you'll see as I talk through some of the models that these models are not models that we can start or stop. And if let's say a vaccine is created in November and everybody can go back to life as quote unquote normal, we've already committed to providing students with instruction in a specific way. I will say that there is, of course, flexibility that we're building into these models to make sure that we can really go back and forth between being in person and being in virtual settings, because we know that's going to be important. And that balance may change over the course of the year if circumstances change. But I do want to be clear that as we're talking about these models, we are talking about models that we are planning to put in place for the entire school year, for the entire upcoming school year. And the three models, the three kind of buckets that we're looking at, the first is a hybrid model, which would be a combination of in-person and virtual instruction that adheres to physical distancing and safety guidelines. The second is a full virtual model. So this would be necessary when we need to have full virtual or remote instruction when schools are required to close for in-person instruction. And the last model is the Shaker Virtual Academy. This would be a model that's designed for students who are unable to return to school at all for whatever reason, and that we would be providing full-time virtual or online instruction for an identified length of time. This would not include any in-person learning. I mentioned this on Tuesday during my update, but I just want to reiterate, I'm sure you noticed that the 5-day in-person model where students are coming to school every day is not included on this list. That's not because we're not incorporating it or not exploring it. We've explored a 5-day model for all students at length. There are some real challenges to this model. And unfortunately, I want to be clear about where we're spending now most of our time exploring which options. These are the options at this point that are most realistic for the upcoming school year. So in that vein, I want to be clear that right now we're spending the majority of our time exploring specific models for our different schools. For kindergarten, or really pre-kindergarten through grade 8, we're looking at an A-B hybrid model. This means that students will come in for 5 full days of in-person instruction, and that will alternate with a week of virtual instruction. So if I am an A-week student, I will come in for a week in person. I would have my classes in person during that A week, and then on the B week, I would have my classes virtually or online. I want to be clear about a few things here. First of all, I did mention briefly pre-kindergarten. I haven't explored pre-kindergarten in depth yet in one of these updates because there are some unique circumstances for pre-kindergarten. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear. Also, in this model right now, most likely, students will have in-person teachers and they will have virtual teachers, and those two teachers will not be the same. So my A-week in-person teacher will be one person, my B-week virtual teacher will be another person. However, if we end up having to go into an all virtual mode, then my in-person teacher will most likely serve as my regular teacher during that virtual extended closure. For high school, we're looking at what we call a 3/4 hybrid. In high school, much more complex schedule and different requirements than our kindergarten through 8th grade. Students for high school, we're looking at students being assigned into 3 different groups. Each group will have in-person learning 3 days a week for 4 hours a day, and students, like in the younger grades, will have virtual instruction when not attending in person. And virtual instruction will include a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities. Like the state, we have some guiding principles that have really driven our work up until this point. First and most importantly, student and staff health and safety. I keep mentioning this. I know many of you are following the news, and you know that our COVID-19 numbers are continuing to increase in this county and across the state. And we know that whatever model we have next year, we need to ensure student and staff health and safety. Secondly, we want to ensure that our models next year, our learning structures next year, align to and advance our district strategic plan. As our district strategic plan rests on two pillars or non-negotiables: educational equity and the International Baccalaureate Framework. And so we want to make sure that our learning models advance our work in both of these areas next year. And I'll be talking about how we're going to do that when I talk a little more about our course offerings later in this presentation. I want to talk specifically about what these guiding principles mean in practice, because I think it's really important that we're translating these overarching ideas into practice as we build models in our schools. So first of all, we believe it's really important that students are placed into cohorts or pods whenever possible. This means that students will be with or in the same cohort of students throughout the school day. And those cohorts are relatively small. Generally, those cohorts or pods will be between, let's say, 10 and maybe 15 students at the highest part, or the most number of students, maybe 15, but more likely closer to 10 students. We're using the same model in our athletic programming. This is especially a model that we're looking at in our pre-K to 8 programming. It gets a little more challenging at the high school level. And the reason this is important is because when somebody gets sick with COVID-19, if they are placed in a pod, it really helps to limit the exposure of everyone else around them, and also enables us to continue having in-person education in place without shutting down the full program. So typically the way the pod works is if one person gets sick, then that pod is required to quarantine or be tested, or both, but we don't have to shut down the entire program. So that's one really important element that we're incorporating into our structures for the fall. Secondly, whenever possible, we would prefer that teachers move classrooms, teachers switch classrooms, and that students stay in place. Again, this is especially true at the pre-K to 8 level. It gets much more difficult at the high school level. This is very different from how school normally runs, particularly in grades 5 and up. Usually in our younger grade, in all of our grades, but especially in grades 5 and up, students switch classrooms and teachers stay put. In this model, we are going to be having teachers do most of the moving and students stay put. Again, this allows us to have real structures in place to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And lastly, and I know we've already alluded to this, the governor did and so have I, physical distancing must be maintained throughout the school day. This means that class sizes must be substantially smaller so that we can fit fewer number of students spread out over a wider space. It also means that we're using our spaces differently. So we've gotten questions about whether we're considering the use of our gyms, our cafeterias, our multi-purpose areas, and other spaces, and we are, but we still need to make sure that we're maintaining physical distancing, and this will require class sizes to be smaller. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about our course offerings at the secondary level. And at the secondary school level, we're talking about Woodberry, the middle school, and the high school. And I'm going to go through each of those buildings individually. So at Woodberry, based on our current draft plans, and I know I say this all the time, but I want to be clear, and at this point, nothing is set in stone. We're still in exploration mode. But we are trying to put meat on the bones of our models and really mock up models to see what they will look like in the fall. So at Woodberry, based on the A-B model, all students will learn the enriched level standards. At the same time, instruction will be differentiated to meet the learning needs of all students. This means that all students will be eligible for all high school course pathways while maintaining high academic standards. So just to be clear, students will not be divided into levels for math and language and literature. Up until now, students have been divided at Woodberry because of into enriched levels or core grade levels for math and language and literature. For the 2020-2021 school year, students will be in math and language and literature. They will not be divided into levels. There are a couple of reasons for this. First of all, thinking about educational equity, we know that it's really important that all of our students have access to high expectations, that we're providing strong supports for students, and that we do not segregate students. Right now, our courses really are advancing or furthering institutional instructional racism. We don't want to do that anymore. That's part of our strategic plan. And we know that tracking or leveling typically contributes to that. Also, because of the health and safety guidelines we are putting in place and the pod model, it's important that we have a structure that allows us to do that. And this does that for our students. I do want to be clear that this model allows all students to be eligible for all high school course pathways upon leaving Woodberry. So, you know, for students who are interested in pursuing AP courses at the high school or IB courses at the IB diploma program at the high school, students will leave Woodbury being able to do that. All students will also continue to take all IB MYP courses, middle years program courses, including language acquisition or world language, visual arts, music, design, PE, and health. We're still looking at how exactly those specials courses or those non-core courses will look, but we are confident that we'll be able to offer them. I do also want to mention band and choir. I know we don't have choir at Woodbury, but this will be relevant for Woodbury and our other grades. We know that band and choir present unique challenges in the COVID-19 era. We're still looking at how we expect to offer music. We're still not sure exactly what that will look like in our different school buildings. For the middle school in a lot of ways will parallel or be very similar to what we'll see at Woodbury. So at the middle school, all students will learn honors level standards in language and literature and science. Typically at the middle school, students are divided into course levels, honors level courses, or core or grade level courses in language and literature and science. For the next school year, all students will learn at the honors level standards in language and literature and science. So just to be clear, this means that students will not be divided in levels for science and language and literature. Math is a little bit different. It's a little bit more unique at the middle school. All 7th grade students will take pre-algebra. So this means that students in the 7th grade will not be divided in levels for mathematics. Again, all 7th grade students will take pre-algebra. 8th grade students will continue to be divided into levels for mathematics. 8th grade students will be divided into Algebra 1 or 8th grade math. We are still working to see if we can provide some additional math to make sure that more students are taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade at the middle school. That's something that we're still working on. So it's a little bit too much in draft form for me to talk more at length about today. But again, just to be clear, students at the middle school will not be divided in levels for science and language and literature. At the 7th grade, they will not be divided in levels for math. They will be divided in levels for 8th grade math. All students will be at the 7th grade level in language and literature and science and math, and in 8th grade, language and literature and science will be learning at that honors level advanced standards. We do expect that we will be able to differentiate learning for students to provide individualized instruction, supports, interventions, enrichments for students. We know that small class sizes presents us with some unique opportunities next year. Also, we know that it's going to be really important to support students' social, emotional, and mental well-being. And we think our structures allow us to do that. Like Woodbury, all students will continue to take all of the IB middle years program courses, including language acquisition, the visual arts, music, design, PE, and health. And like I mentioned before, band and choir present some unique challenges in the COVID-19 era. So that's something that we're still working out. Lastly, the high school. In the high school model, we are excited and we believe that we are able to going to be able to continue to offer all AP, advanced placement, and IB diploma program classes. We'll be continuing to offer those at the high school level. We expect that we're going to be merging or consolidating course classes at the honors core classes or honors core levels. So for example, right now at the high school, we have classes that are called slash classes, core honor classes, and we also have we have a core level and an honors level. Those levels we expect will be consolidated to allow us to implement this program and also to promote educational equity. All students in those merged classes we expect will earn honors credit. That means they'll be meeting the same standards as our honors students have in the past. I'm also excited to announce that based on the schedule we've drafted so far, we believe that having students take 3 to 4 classes per semester will actually allow students to take 1 more course per year than they would in a regular year. Normally students, I believe, take 7 courses, and this would allow them to take up to 8 courses. Like our earlier grades, we expect that students at the high school will continue to take world language, art, music, PE, health, and other special subject areas. And like I've mentioned before, bands and choir is still something that we're working out at the high school. I want to be clear that this schedule, along with the other schedules I mentioned at Woodberry and middle school, enables us to have in-person learning at the high school while also tackling and addressing some of the real issues that we've had with educational equity in the past. I think it's really important to mention that this goes hand in hand. I know none of us are happy about the pandemic, but I think we have an opportunity here to do right by our students, to do what's in the best needs of our students, to better meet the needs of all of our students, and to ensure that more of our students, and really all of our students, are prepared for a wide range of course pathways at all grade levels and careers beyond the high school, college and careers beyond the high school. So with that, I am going to conclude my presentation today. I thank everybody for participating. I know that I shared a lot of information today. We will be posting this presentation on our website, www.shaker.org. I encourage everybody to tune in again next week. And just to go over a quick timeline, we are hopeful that we will be able to share or distribute our plan for the 2020-2021 school year at the end of next week, most likely on Thursday, at this update on Thursday. I know I've been sharing bits and pieces of the plan so far, but we expect to continue to solidify things over the next week and release a plan next Thursday. As always, everyone is encouraged to submit questions in advance that we can address. And lastly, I would like to wish everybody a good weekend, a happy July 4th weekend. I hope everybody has some time to enjoy the summer, and I look forward to seeing you next week.